Celebrating 4 years of talk like you've never heard it before. This is GABNET, the Great American Broadcast Network. We're GABNET, and we've got you covered live 5 nights a week. First Tuesday through Friday at 9:30 Eastern, it's The Exchange.
Let's capture, who are all these people who are watching these cooking shows? And they're stoners, right? So I'm wondering, is this a program that Netflix has absorbed? I don't know, what is the purpose of Netflix making a 14-minute show? Now, aside from those 2 interesting facts about this show, the show is fucking terrible. Do not watch this show. It fucking sucks.
Tuesday through Friday at 10 Eastern. Join Alex Bennett on the Ramble.
Say goodbye to the unions.
Renee, what was the decision? And then we'll go to Patrick.
It doesn't matter. Just say goodbye to the unions.
No. But I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you what was in the decision yesterday.
I'm going to look it up.
Okay, let me look it up.
Yeah, he'll go look it up at glennbeck.com.
Tuesday through Friday at midnight, The Intersection.
Most high school boys, what have we got on our mind? Sex and girls and sex and sex and sex.
And booze and drugs.
Yeah, the Asian guys I knew in high school, I'm sure they thought that way, but perhaps they were more disciplined about it. Although there was this Japanese girl in high school that your old friend, the Black Avenger, had the hots for. Oh, my God. Be still my sake wanting to drink self.
If you like sports, we've got that too, with The Arena, Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern.
Well, and even if you did that, it doesn't give you the right to grab your Uber driver's private. I mean, and like, what part of that to him sounded like a good idea?
Oh, she played a special song.
Catch up on all the shows with our weekend flashback. All shows have the Citizen Panel, an exclusive concept of GABNET. It's new, it's daring, it's talk like you've never heard it before. Spotify has 180 million monthly users and access to 35 million songs and podcasts. Now, all those offerings are going to have to move over and make room for GABNET programming. Yes, at long last, Alex Bennett's Ramble, Damian Chaplin's Exchange, Jack Bishop's The Intersection, and even the franchise MC's Arena and Michael Snyder's weekly movie reviews will be fighting for space on this massive platform. Each day, the programs are updated, so you can hear them on the Spotify app, available for all smartphones and game consoles. Or you can just go to Spotify on the web at spotify.com. So, give us a shot on Spotify. There's a 35 million to 5 chance we'll get people to listen to talk like they've never heard it before. Talk like you've never heard it before is now talk like you've never seen it before. Alex Bennett's Ramble is now in video. Log on to Alex's Facebook page at facebook.com/abennett every Tuesday through Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern and experience the Citizen Panel like never before. We put a face to people like Phil, Patrick, Renee, Kevin, Tony, Jeff, Bree, Brian, and all of our regulars. And Alex is there too in his PJs. Just be glad he isn't naked. You can be one of those people who gets seen and not just heard by calling into Skype. For more information on how to Skype us, just go to gabnet.net. You can dress any way you want, provided it's decent. GABNET is now not just talk and not just a pretty face. So why don't you add yours? Celebrating 4 years of talk like you've never heard it before. This is GABNET, the Great American Broadcast Network.
Hello, everybody. It's the Ramble, and we go until midnight here on the East Coast of the United States. Anywhere else, Just figure out what time it is where you are. Anyway, and if it's not that time now, there, wherever, then the thing is, the show is, it's live. But if it's not, then this is a recording. Yeah, this is a recording. I always feel like I'm a recording. But anyway, we go on at 10 o'clock Eastern time. And if it's around that time wherever you are, or the equivalent, like out on the West Coast, if it's 7 o'clock, yeah, it's live, right? Could I do that if it wasn't live? Of course not. Anyway, boy, I'm telling you, I am the biggest fucking idiot in the world. Let me tell you why. All day I've felt like shit on a shingle. Okay, now you're going, what's the difference between that and any other day where you tell us you feel like shit? The difference is today I really feel like shit. I don't know what it is. It's either allergies or it's the weather or last night, as I was lying in bed, you ever do this? You take a sip of like a liquid and the liquid goes down the wrong way, and then you start coughing like crazy, and you're realizing you choked on liquid, all right? And so I hacking like crazy. Well, I wake up this morning, and all day my esophagus and my throat and stuff have been raw. And I don't know what's caused. I don't know if it was that caused it, or just the fact that that's the way the weather's going, or whatever. Anyway, I feel like crap. Okay. So tonight I come on the air here and I go, well, get my normal stuff. I get my diet soda and I make myself my cup of coffee. Well, I just thought to myself, what a fucking moron I am. I've got a bad throat. I should have made tea. I'm an idiot. I'm a fool. Instead, I'm taking this coffee, which is rough on my throat. So anyway, I hope we get some callers tonight, because when we go to the citizen panel, you're going to have to do all the talking, gang. Anyway, we'll get to them shortly, probably sooner than usual, because I don't have anything to really much to talk about here. But anyway, so by the way, I want to. A weird thing happened. We always look for ways to get people to watch our programming. So all of a sudden, I noticed you can see this the YouTube video of this in several different places. One of which is on YouTube itself. Okay, but then I also send it over to what is the name of that Facebook page? It's you go to facebook.com/Alex Bennett Program. Okay. Now, that's a weird site because we don't normally advertise that site as existing. But it is a page, and it's a page that we serve using our Vimeo files. And we just make it available there, too. So anyway, some guy in San Francisco, there's a site called Remembering San Francisco on Facebook, right? But it's got something like, 29,000 followers or something like that. So this guy somebody wrote like, whatever happened to Alex Bennett? And he said, he's living in New York and he does a show out of New York. And then he gave a reference to that particular page and the file of last night's show. Now, normally on that page I get, what did I get the night before? Well, we got 49 views. Right? I just put it on that page so some people will see it. And so he mentions this, and that they should go there if they want to see what I'm doing. And so far, we've had 573 viewers. What am I doing wrong? So for all those people who somehow have found me from San Francisco, let everybody know that we're here every night live, and that you can go to YouTube every day after the show's over and watch it there. Or you can go to my Facebook page and see the show there. But last night, because he told people, hey, this is where you can go look, what do you call it? 573. heading towards 600. So anyway, it's 10 times what we did the night before. It's crazy. It's just crazy. So thank you. I forget what the guy's name was. Attila Paul is the name he uses. Now, whether Attila Paul, I don't know who Attila Paul is, but Attila Paul Jung is his name. And but it doesn't, there's no way I can go to that page and find him. Anyway, thank you. I just want to say thank you. Anyway, so my eyes are tearing tonight, and I'm sucking on throat lozenges, which are back there. And I should be drinking tea, but I'm not. I'm drinking coffee because I'm trying to stay awake. And for 2 nights, I didn't. Oh, one thing, I've been taking these pills called gabapentin, and I decided not to take them for a couple of nights. And I'm just wondering if these are withdrawal symptoms from the drug, even though I'm getting a very low dose. Here's what happens with me and medication. I am extremely sensitive to it. You give me a half a Xanax and put me to sleep on it, and I wake up the next morning, I'm groggy for half the day. Now, girlfriend, on the other hand, it barely makes a dent in her ability to sleep. But anyway, so here we go, sneeze. It's whatever. Sorry for that, folks. I didn't get over the microphone fast enough to turn that down. Anyway, see, I told you I wasn't well. Anyway, I'm very sensitive to drugs, and so my neurologist who gave me the gabapentin, he said, well, you start with the hundreds and then work your way to the 200s and then do about 300 milligrams a day. And I told him I was only taking 1 because 3 were really looping me out during the day. And he went, and what does 1 do? I said, it makes me loopy as well on 1. And he says, boy, you're really sensitive to these drugs, because he had given me something else. And I went, crazy. So anyway, I was just looking at a note Phil wrote. He said this guy, Paul, is a friend of his. Because Phil knows everybody in the world. Anyway, where was I? Oh, so I'm just really sensitive to drugs. He gave me amitriptyline, which is an old line drug for the thing initially, and I had terrible withdrawal symptoms when I stopped taking it. And he said, but I gave you the lowest dose possible. You shouldn't have had any effect from. I went, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to, but I do. He said, you're really sensitive to drugs. And I said, no shit. So anyway, you know why I think I'm really sensitive to drugs? Girlfriend isn't. A girlfriend, she goes to bed every night and she takes a potion of pills to put her to sleep. A Benadryl, 2 Benadryl, okay? A Xanax, half a Xanax. What do you call it? What's a melatonin? She has this cocktail to put her to sleep every night, and some nights she tosses and turns. And she wakes up in the morning, and she's bright and chipper and goes to work, and blah, blah, blah. She can't hop out of bed right now because of the knee. But, and they hardly affect her at all. I think it's that I haven't done enough drugs in my lifetime. And she's done enough to, drop elephants dead in their tracks. Okay, so she's used to them, but I'm not, and consequently, some of these pills have been really bad for me. So I don't know. But the gabapentin makes me. You know what it does? Would you believe this? But I can be a pretty mean asshole if I'm in a bad mood, or if something annoys me, or it's 3:00 in the afternoon. And I found I took the gabapentin, and girlfriend always said, well, you're always a little edgy with me. You always say things in a certain way, and so on and so forth. I started taking this drug, and she said, you're such a pleasant person to be around now. And it was making me very pleasant. So I decided Maybe my watch went off against Phil again. Look at my Facebook friends. If you want to find him, I met his family and went to the cigar bar with him and his friends last month. Okay, well, anyway, thank you very much. I'm replying from my watch. Anyway, where were we? Oh, yeah. So, as I said, I'm very sensitive to drugs, and they kind of throw me all up. But this pill has made me so nice that I don't want to stop that. So if I take it in the morning, I wake up, and every now and then I get like dizzy spells, and I have to sit down. And I take the smallest amount. My doctor says this amount, most people don't even feel the effects of. Okay, me, I'm off to the races. Anyway, what do I have to talk about? Not much, because there's a lot to talk about, and we'll get to that. You know, it'll come up when the citizen panel arrives here. But here's the story that kind of gets me a little bit. Do you know who Kevin Hart is? Of course, most people know who Kevin Hart is. He's a comedian. In my opinion, mediocre comedian. Not particularly great. I mean, look, I'm trying to blow my nose, and I get this in the way. All right. Anyway. So Kevin Hart is this a comedian. He's I would describe him as a black comedian. And extremely short, by the way. This guy, I think, is like he's about an inch short of being a midget, okay? And he's very big in comedy, though, and basically because he's a good promoter, and all things said, he has a rather nice kind of demeanor and personality, and he's nice to his fans, and I just don't think he's that good a comedian. So anyway, the Oscars, in their never-ending desire to try and placate a younger audience, thinking that if they change the Oscars, they will attract a younger audience, are always looking for ways to do that. So, last couple of years, they tried it with Jimmy Kimmel. He plays to the younger people. Well, not so much. You know, he plays to kind of a 35, 40-year-olds around in there. Okay. I know what we'll do. We'll change the nominations, the kind of categories we have. We'll have popular film or something like that. That'll get the kids in. No one won't, because to the kids, the Oscars are really old school. All right? And not anything you do to try to placate them, you're not going to be able to do. And in the meantime, you're going to lose the older audience. But anyway, they go out and they try and get somebody that's really hip. Au courant, as they say. And so they go out and they think, this is a good idea. Let's go get Kevin Hart. Well, the one thing you get with a comedian... Hold on a second, folks. My nose is just... hold on. I turned down my microphone so you wouldn't have to hear that. Anyway. Boy, I don't know what I've got something. Anyway, where was I? Oh, so the whole idea is we're gonna go get somebody really hip. But you should know that if you hire a comedian, what you take with that comedian is the baggage of his act. And why I say that is what somebody will do on a stage in a nightclub or in an auditorium somewhere is not something they would do on television. In fact, most comedians I know have two acts. They have the 5-minute bit they do on television, and then they have the one they do in the theaters. And now, more particularly, things like Netflix, who will allow the kind of ribald humor that most comics do today. But you will still have that 5-minute chunk that you can do, on regular television. But you got to know that when you are hiring a comic, you're bringing with him all the baggage of his act. And what you do in comedy, my feeling is, anything you want to do in the name of comedy is fair. I may not like your act. I may think you're unfunny. I may not like the perspective you come from, and in which case, I'm not going to watch your Netflix special. But the fact is that comedians work in an atmosphere of supposedly non-political correctness. Because if you're a politically correct comedian, you probably really suck, you know? And so you try not to be politically correct. You try to be outrageous. And so what happened was they decided to get Kevin Hart. Oh, he's a very famous comedian. He makes movies. He had Jumanji out this year, which was a big film for him, or The Rock, or Karen Gillan, any one of them, because they were all in that film, and they all contributed equally to its success, in my opinion. So they figure, let's go get Kevin Hart. Okay, what a find. Yeah, and the kids will go for him, and we'll get a black audience with Kevin Hart. Oh, this is going to be great. Well, the Oscars are very white. The Oscars are very, even though there are black people in there and Hispanics and everything else, it's still, Hollywood is a white group of people, very white. But they try to make it darker, and they try to make get more women into it, And there are more women now. We have a lot of women directors now, but they're not working movies. They're working television. If you look at the credits on television shows, you will see that women really make up the preponderance of directors now. But anyway, I digress. Let's go get Kevin Hart. Well, there's one other thing about the Academy and about Hollywood. It's, shall we say, and I don't want to, I'm not saying this is a pejorative thing, I'm just saying it as a fact of existence. Hollywood is very gay. I mean, there is a gay contingent in Hollywood that is very pervasive. It does very well in Hollywood. You've got some openly gay producers, for instance, like the guy who does American Horror Story and so on. American Crime Story, and quite a few others. The Versace thing that was nominated this year by the Golden Globes. A lot of your actors are gay. A lot of your, So Hollywood has always embraced gays. They weren't at one point terribly openly gay. But did you know this? And you don't realize this. Spencer Tracy was maybe gay and definitely bisexual. What, you didn't know that? Well, he never looked it. Well, get used to it. That's how being gay looks. All right? So, there was always the controversy about Cary Grant, who got a telegram once. I'm digressing on this. He got a telegram once from some guy, because when you send telegrams in those days, you were very terse in what you wrote because you were paying by the word. So some reporter wrote him a telegram, and it read, "How old Cary Grant?" And he wrote back, "Old Cary Grant, fine." Anyway, but Cary Grant, it was rumored that he was gay. By the way, this is interesting. I had always assumed that James Dean was gay. And then I asked Jack Garfein, who you heard the interview with last night, it was very close to James Dean. We were having dinner here, and in the interview, if you heard him, he said, "And I kissed Jimmy goodbye." And I said, gee, with Jimmy being gay and all that kind of sounded a little strange, even though I understand what you're saying because you're very European. And I kiss Jack when he comes over. I kiss him hello on the cheek and everything and embrace him, And he said, well, no. He said, James Dean wasn't gay. I said, no, I always assumed he was. And he said, no, he was very, very straight. So all the ones you thought were gay were straight, and the ones that were straight were gay. I was watching a comedian in movies the other day called Billy DeWolf. I don't know if you ever remember who Billy DeWolf was. But I looked at him and I watched him acting, and I went, I never thought about it. Billy DeWolf is gay. I mean, he was very fey in his performance. Anyway, what's the point I'm trying to make here? Anyway, so it seems that Kevin Hart, in his act, made some comments about gays. He also had some tweets about gays. This was like 10 years ago. Maybe the special he did was 5 years ago. Something to the extent of, I have nothing against gays, I'm not homophobic, but if my son came home and he was thinking about being gay, I would try to talk him out of it, or something like that. Which I think any heterosexual father probably would, you know. I mean, you want what's best for your child, and living a gay lifestyle, at least a few years ago, was not the best thing for your son. So he made a comment which was taken as being a bad thing. So he apologized for it profusely, all right, and did his mea culpas and did his apology tour. And so all this comes back now to bite him in the ass when they offer him the job of being the host of the Oscars. And it comes out today now that Kevin Hart is stepping down as Oscars host just 2 days after the Academy announced he would take on the high-profile gig. The move came amid a mounting controversy after old tweets surfaced in which Hart expressed anti-gay sentiments and used homophobic terminology and slurs. Now, mind you, all of this had come to light a few years back. And Hart told the world he's stepping down. He reads, "I have made a choice to step down from hosting this year's Oscars. This is because I do not want it to be a distraction on a night that should be celebrated by so many amazing, talented artists. I sincerely apologize to the LGBTQ community for my insensitive words from my past." But he quickly added in a second tweet, "I'm sorry that I hurt people. I'm evolving and I want to continue to do so. My goal is to bring people together." Now, earlier in the evening, Hart posted an Instagram video from Sydney, Australia, where he is touring, saying that he refused a demand from the Academy to apologize. He said the Academy gave him an ultimatum: apologize for his old tweets or step down as an Oscar host. And he said that he offered an apology that earlier he later offered that apology. But the thing is, he said, "I don't want to apologize for it because I already have." This was in 2015 when all of this came to light. "I apologized profusely. I did my apologies. I don't have to apologize again. This is old stuff." And yes, it is old stuff. And apparently, in spite of that, he still maintained his standing in Hollywood. He's still in movies. He maintained his high-profile comedy life, and people kept coming to his shows. So in a way, the audience had taken his mea culpa and his apologies earlier like they should be taken, and he just felt that apologizing again was redundant and that he didn't have to do it because he had already done it. And I agree with him. You see, I think that what was said in the name of comedy a few years back, when you didn't know whether it was bad or good, you know. I'll tell you a story, a quick story. When I did my show in San Francisco, San Francisco got hit by something very strange. It was called AIDS. It was like we didn't know what caused it, but we knew that it was affecting gay people. Basically, gay community was getting AIDS. So one morning, I'm doing my show, and some guy comes in, one of the comedians. I don't know who he was. I can't remember who he was. And he did some kind of joke about AIDS and gays. And I thought about it. And the next day, I came in with an edict. It's the only edict I ever gave comics. The only thing I ever said was off limits, outside of using four-letter words, which you couldn't use on radio. I said, no more jokes about AIDS. I said, last night I was watching a documentary on it, and it is a horrible, horrible disease. The Kaposi's sarcomas that people get, the anguish in the deaths that they face is horrible. And the only reason you're making fun, you wouldn't make fun of cancer, the only reason you're making fun of AIDS is because you perceive of it as a funny disease because you perceive of gay people as being funny. And I think that when we make fun of AIDS, we're being homophobic. And I said, no more of those jokes on my show. And we stopped. It was the only time I ever made something off limits because I didn't think that AIDS was a joke. And so therefore, you know, a lot of times, a lot of comedians would make AIDS jokes, By the way, the only funny AIDS joke I ever heard was, what's the worst part about getting AIDS? And that's having to tell your parents you're Haitian. But anyway, that's the only funny AIDS joke I ever heard. The point I'm making is that what comedians do in the heat of an act sometimes is inappropriate. At one time, it's not considered particularly inappropriate. It's just considered cutting edge. But then later on, when you look back at it, yes, it was inappropriate. And you've evolved as a human being, and so has the society, and so are the mores of the society, and so on. And so therefore, should you be held responsible for what you said many, many years ago? And especially since you already apologized for it. So I felt that Kevin Hart yesterday, when he said, I'm not going to apologize because I've already apologized for it once, was being very brave. He kind of then went on to apologize in tweets and stuff because he realizes some people didn't hear the apology back then, all right? So now he's not doing it. Now, guess who gets mad that he quits? You're not going to believe this. Okay, only in this day and age of political correctness would this happen. Guess what group came out and said he shouldn't have quit? GLAAD. You know what GLAAD is? The gay, lesbian, and lesbian. It's the Anti-Defamation League for gay people. It's the Gay and Lesbian Alliance against defamation. All right, GLAAD. They think Kevin Hart should not have stepped down as the Oscar host. Here's why. The president and CEO of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation said that Kevin Hart shouldn't have stepped down. He should have stepped up after the comedian announced he would not be hosting the Oscars. Sarah Kate Ellis commented on Hart's move in a statement today. Hart's apology to the LGBTQ people as an important step forward, but he missed the real opportunity to use his platform at the Oscars and on that stage to build unity and awareness. I find that off-putting. Okay. He shouldn't quit because he should use that platform as, I don't know, a teaching moment. Hey, I don't watch the fucking Oscars to see a teaching moment. I watch the Oscars to see people win fucking trophies that they hardly need at all because they made the money off those movies and they have a career, and that's really the prize they should have. But I don't know that I want a teaching moment. I don't want him to feel, Kevin Hart, that he has to go up there and be inclusive and say the right stuff. Because we want him to get up there and be funny. Do what he does, okay? And so I find what GLAAD did here to be just as wrong as anything Kevin Hart may have done in the past. Let me tell you one more story. I had a run-in with GLAAD years ago. I was always a friend of the gay community. By that I mean I always did everything I could to support it. There were gay comics on my show. Many of them people didn't know were gay because they didn't want people to know they were gay. But nevertheless, I had them on my show. I had openly gay comics on my show. I was about as inclusive. I was more inclusive in my radio program than any other morning show or any other comedy show in the country. All right? One morning, somebody called me or something. We were talking about Sam Kinison, the comedian. And they said, do you think he's homophobic? And I said, no, Sam isn't homophobic. You know, Sam is a comedian, and he says stuff, to be outrageous. And there was stuff in Sam's act, but it didn't really, I didn't take it as homophobic. I took it kind of as like him being the contrarian, all right? So now we get a thing from the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and they say, oh, we want to have a meeting with Mr. Bennett and his crew and with the management of the radio station because we're upset by what was said on the air. We said, well, what was said on the air? He said, Well, Mr. Bennett said he didn't think that Sam Kinison was homophobic. And it may not even been me that, no, I think it was me. I may have said that, or it may have been somebody else. I can't remember. But in any event, it wasn't something really, it was just an opinion that I had. And they came in and they were playing recordings of Sam Kinison's act. They were taking Sam Kinison's act and they spliced out all the intros and the outros of a particular bit, and they were just running the part where he went, homosexual, whatever. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this as they're sitting on one side of the table and the management of the radio station and myself are on the other side of the table. And they look like, all of a sudden, what I'm seeing in front of me are a bunch of Nazis, right? And finally, I just got up and I said, stop. I said, what you're doing here is horrible. You're taking a man's act. You're only playing parts of it. You're not making your case particularly. And you're also blaming me for something I never really did. You're not coming in here saying, hey, Alex Bennett said something homophobic. You're thinking that because I defended somebody who you think is homophobic, that makes me homophobic by attrition. I said, you're nothing but a bunch of Nazis, and I won't have anything to do with this. And I got up, and I walked out the door and slammed the door shut. And I could hear this gasp on the other side of the door. And from that time on, I just went, one of the things I said to them as I left was, you have had a friend of the gay community here with me. And what you're doing is you're alienating me, or you're attempting to alienate me, or you don't know that what you're saying could alienate me. But I won't be alienated because I'm not going to change how I feel about the gay community because a bunch of you people are doing what you're doing. And I went out, and they never had the guts to really launch a boycott against us or whatever because they knew they didn't really have a case. But about a half a year later, we had a thing where somebody came in and said, "Well, we want you to do something for this." Health club. And what we want you to do is if you can do certain milestones, like ride a bike for a half hour or something like that, and if not something else, we'll give $5,000 to the cause of your choice. And I said, okay. So I did it, and I got the $5,000. And what I did, I gave 50% of it to Meals on Wheels, which was an organization that delivered food to AIDS victims, okay? And I gave the other $2,500 to GLAAD, who then got a hold of me and said, is this check really for us? And I said, yes. And they said, why? I said, because just because you're a bunch of assholes doesn't mean you're not doing something that's worthwhile, and I want to help you. And from that time on, GLAAD loved me. But I always found the organization a bit off-putting because they were always the politically sensitive police, and I didn't like that because you don't go around and make people mad at you who really should be your friend and are your friends. And if I were less of a person, I would have been so put off by them that I would have just never had anything to do with them again. But anyway, I just feel that Kevin Hart paid his dues about 3 years ago, and he didn't need to pay it again, and I agree with him. And the whole thing is a what we call it. Comedy of errors. Anyway, phone lines are open now. Geez, I said I couldn't talk because I wasn't feeling well, and look at me. I've gone for like 35 minutes of this show just talking. I wish I could remember that story about Glad even better, because I don't even think it was something that I said. I think it was something that somebody else said. But in any event, I just, I didn't. That kind of thing just really made me mad. And by the way, you asked, how did the general manager feel about me leaving under those circumstances? And after it was all over, he said, "Don't ever say this to anybody, but good going." Because they felt the same way. Anyway, I think Tom Yamaguchi is calling, and I bet Tom remembers that story better than I do. Right, Tom?
Which story are you talking about?
The one with Glad and me.
Yeah, I do remember that story.
Yeah.
I also remember the when you decided not to allow age jokes.
Yeah.
To be told on your program as well. So
yeah.
I remember both of those. But there's so much. There is just so much I want to respond to, and I just don't. Once again, I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
But I will start with to just invoke George Takei. It's not a lifestyle; it's a life. So please do not say gay lifestyle.
But did I say gay lifestyle?
You say gay lifestyle.
Well, just because George Takei says that doesn't mean it's right.
Well, it is. Well, he is right. That's why I invoke it, because he is absolutely
right. No, it absolutely is a
I
life.
Do not live.
It is a life.
I live a gay lifestyle.
You want to know something? It has its trappings. In other words, wait a minute. And just like a lot of other things have their trappings, being gay, many people adopt certain styles and so on to be part of that community. So you could say they adopt a gay lifestyle.
Okay, so what is my gay lifestyle?
Well, no, you're gay. You don't let your sexuality define you. You define your sexuality, and that's what I like about you, Tom. But you have to admit there are some gays who let the community define their lifestyle.
I'm still not following you.
Well,
I think he's talking about Castro Street.
I think the thing is that there are gay people who live their lives, and some of them may seem to you to fall into a stereotype, which is true.
Yeah.
I mean, you could find
okay.
A whole
So
bunch of people
okay.
fall, I mean, do you live a Jewish lifestyle?
Not really. No.
Okay.
Not really. But I do know a lot of Jews that do, and I say they live a Jewish lifestyle.
And
you
what's
identify.
That?
Oh, you're living in New York? Well, go watch Mrs. Maisel.
How about your business
Go
manager?
watch Mrs. Maisel on Amazon, and you'll see what a Jewish lifestyle is.
It wasn't as good as last season.
No, I think it was as good as last season.
You son of a bitch! I looked at it last night. I watched 7 episodes to 3 in the morning. Then I got up. I watched 2 more episodes, and then I watched the final one at work.
I thought it was terrific. But anyway.
Hey.
But is that a gay lifestyle? Is that a Jewish lifestyle, Phil, that show describes?
Yeah, it is, especially in the 50s.
Yeah.
We're getting off topic here.
Okay.
Back to the topic at hand, Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to say is one thing I didn't know about this statement from Glad, and I'm so glad you read that. But the statement was that his tweets were saying he doesn't want his son to be gay. He actually, in these tweets...
No, that wasn't a tweet.
He actually threatened violence against his son if he found out he was gay.
Who's this?
Kevin Hart.
Oh.
And...
wait a minute. Hold on a second. Hold on a second,
He
though.
may apologize. Excuse me, let me just finish.
Yeah.
He may have apologized, but he did not delete the tweets until now. They've finally been deleted. Why didn't he delete the tweets if he felt so bad about what he had written and felt so remorseful? Why didn't he delete them?
I probably wouldn't have deleted them for the reason that they've been there for so long that people have made copies of them and they've been repeated over and over again across the web, and that by me simply deleting it doesn't make it stop.
Well, it shows you that you are sensitive.
Look.
You actually, even if somebody's archived it.
To begin with, Tom. To begin with, Tom.
This is the reason I don't want to hurt people.
Yeah, the first.
I personally have. Yeah. I'll tell you something else. I have deleted a tweet.
Yeah,
because I found out that tweet was harmful to someone. I did not intend any harm by that tweet. But when I found out that there were people that felt harmed by that tweet, I went ahead and deleted it. Okay?
No, that's fine. But just because you deleted it doesn't mean it's not still out there.
Well, at least it's not.
It's
not further propagated.
Rob,
do you think with 330 million people in this country alone, forget about what's around the rest of the world and how the whole world is tied in together today because of the internet and Twitter and all this. Do you think it's possible really to say anything, almost even hello, and not offend somebody?
Well,
I mean, you when people like you didn't mean to offend somebody by your tweet, and so it offended somebody. You cannot, nobody. Now I know there are what Roseanne said and got her thrown off the air was really offensive. But if you make a tweet or if you say something on some social media, you can't. It's like being on the air. You could say something and you're going to offend somebody. We have to get over that. We have to get over everybody being offended by everything.
Different. Okay. And not just that anybody can be offended. In this case, that person or those people proved to me that I shouldn't have. That what I had done was something that was hurtful to them or potentially hurtful to them, and then I agreed with them, and I recognized.
Wait a minute. Let me tell you something.
I went ahead and deleted it.
Let me tell you something. To begin with, comedians will, and I know comedians, as you know, quite well. And what comedians do is anything they can to get that they think will get a laugh. And sometimes it's completely wrong, okay? But they think that that's the way to get a laugh. Kathy Griffin with holding the Trump head. Didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Look, I'll get a laugh off this. Even go to what's his name from Seinfeld, Kramer. Yeah, what's his name? I can't remember. Michael Richards. With what he did. As I watched it, I said, this isn't a guy that's racist, particularly. This is a guy who is so frustrated that nobody's laughing that he's trying anything he can to get a laugh. So what happens in comedy, whatever what's his name said? Oh God, my mind's
Kevin Hart.
Kevin Hart said he was doing to get, I think, first and foremost, to get a laugh. Granted, he was in bad taste. Granted, he was wrong. Granted, he had every reason to apologize for it. But that's how a comedy mind works. It works first saying, how can I get a laugh? It doesn't care how can I get a message across. How can I spew my hate? Many times they don't think they're spewing their hate. Just like I said with these people who would come in and tell AIDS jokes and think it was positively okay. But it was okay to them because they found being gay somehow fodder for laughter. Yeah.
Can I follow?
Yeah, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'm glad you actually made that point about the AIDS jokes. We'll get back to the fact that regardless of whether they just want to get a laugh on, they have to take responsibility for what they say. And if their comedy victimizes someone, and once again, I'll invoke Paul Krasner's rule on avoiding bad taste: never make the victim never make the victim the target of your comedy. And there's lots of ways that you can make. You said, you can make jokes about AIDS. You can make jokes about cancer.
But all I'm saying,
you can make jokes about wife beating.
You're not.
Okay?
But
as long as the victim is not the person with AIDS, not the person
with
cancer.
You don't have any argument with me, but who you do have an argument with are comedians who aren't thinking in those terms. They're thinking in terms of how do I get a laugh.
They should start thinking of those.
Well,
terms,
they should. Okay, let me ask you this. Back then, when I made that rule on my show, no AIDS jokes, because what you're really doing is making fun of gay people. If this were a heterosexual disease that was hitting the heterosexual community heavily, you wouldn't be making jokes about it. And so they stopped. But I had some comedians say, why? Why can't we tell jokes about AIDS? And I had to go through a full explanation. Now, if somebody said an AIDS joke back then, and now, today, they want to hire him to do the Academy Awards, and then they go back to that and use that as the example. Is that fair because he hadn't been made apprised of the current, the zeitgeist, of the tempo of the times?
Well, if he apologizes, yeah. I mean, if he apologizes, says, I didn't realize, I'm sorry I've offended people.
Kevin Hart said exactly those words.
Well, eventually he did, but as I said, he did that after. He did that after.
Eventually, doesn't seem to be good enough to you. The fact is that he did, and came to a certain conscience about it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, Phil.
Yeah, I just want to say that I actually have personally been chided by you in the studio. You didn't allow fat shaming, and I was in the studio. I pulled off the AP a story about a 600.
This is when I was at This is when I was at KMEL.
No,
right?
This was I think when you first went to the Quake.
Oh, okay.
And so I pulled it off the AP, and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And I showed it to you, and you said, no, I'm not going to do this. I won't fat shame. So it's not only the AIDS stuff. You didn't do any of that kind of stuff. And I was personally told, well, you didn't get on me or anything for it. You just said, no, I won't do that.
Yeah.
And so that was the way you ran your show. And so it's also the way you run your life. I believe that people.
I had a lesson.
You live to a higher standard than those things.
I was at KQED doing comedy tonight, and I had to go in and do some voiceovers, and so I was waiting in the reception area, and the receptionist said, "By the way, when you're through, they'd like to see you over in the Over Easy offices." And I said, okay. And Over Easy was this show that KQED produced with Hugh Downs as the host. That was a show about aging and getting older. And so after it was over, I went over to him, and he said, the guy who was the head of the show said to me, yeah, I wanted to bring you in because I wanted to bring something up to you. Move your head, will you, Kevin? Brian, because you're in my box is covering your face. When you lean over in that direction, lean in the other direction, and you'll be okay. Anyway, he's not doing it. Okay. Well, anyway, but the point was
watching it on that YouTube.
The point was that he said to me, I was listening to your show the other day, and you were making jokes about old people. And then he explained to me why old people jokes aren't funny, because old people have a hard enough time living with dignity and living with their age without having people make jokes about it. And from that time on, I saw it. I didn't know it until it was pointed out to me. Okay, he said, one day you're going to be there and you're going to see what I mean. And I do see what he meant. And from that time on, I didn't allow age jokes on my show.
Does that mean that everything's off limits? If just to be funny?
I think
that's the problem. That's the problem, in my opinion, today.
Well,
and I think it's one of the main reasons why the left suffers in voting, because so many people on the left side, everything has got to be so politically correct. We have to, and it hurts us because they think, just toughen up a little bit. This is a world. You're not going to like everything you hear. You're not going to like everything you see. Just move on. Don't get personally offended by what somebody says.
Yeah. Tom has his hand up. Tom?
Yeah, actually, that is because that's a show I do remember. What happened was this was when you and Joe Rogelski were on the Quake,
Yeah.
and you had done a format change where you were doing, well, rock of the '80s, and you had a premise where you were still doing it, 20, 30 years in the future when you're both really old,
Yeah.
and you're still playing the same records.
Yeah.
And so to emphasize the conduit, you started doing, old man senile type
Yeah.
of routine.
Yeah.
And so the reason I bring that up is, once again, you didn't see any harm in that.
Right. Right.
But someone pointed it out to you that it was harmful. And so when you saw that, you recognized that, hey, yeah, what I did was wrong, and I apologize, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there may be people who might be offended by everything, but if you listen to it and say, well, if you say no, I don't think it was offensive, and you give a true, honest evaluation of what you said or did, and go on with it, it's fine.
Yeah, but
if you listen and there's truth in it, well, what's wrong with acknowledging it? It's not a matter of being
well, I think
it's a
what
matter of being respectful.
I think what Rob is trying to say is, aren't we we're just a little too sensitive about everything, rather than just let the chips fall where they may. And if Kevin Hart wants to tell jokes that are perceivably homophobic, then I guess he's going to lose all the gay people in America, and that's a large amount of people, right? Let that be the warning call across the bow. He also was called on it, and he looked at it, and he said, I was wrong, and he did a mea culpa and said, I was wrong, and I apologize, and I'm sorry if I hurt anybody. He did that 3 years ago. And yet right now, this is coming back to haunt him. So apparently, apology doesn't count.
Right.
The thing is, Alex, over the years, I realized that personally, you're an extremely sensitive person. And on air, you have a different persona,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they clash. But ultimately, your sensitive side makes for your ultimate decision. But things clash, and you're trying to do a show, and you're trying to be funny, and you're trying to make your guests funny, and but you're also a sensitive person.
And you have to remember that you're live and you're putting up 4 hours a day and you're trying to fill content.
Yep.
And you can't edit everything in your head and think, before you say something, if you have to get through that whole process of, is this going to offend? Is this not going to offend? You're never going to say anything.
Well, in the beginning, he didn't have 20 people in the studio, but eventually he had a lot of people in the studio. It's really hard to keep them in line.
Well, the thing is also that back then, when I felt that we didn't have all the strictures that we have today, because there's always some group that is going to complain about something you say today. Back then, I felt I was always walking on a tightrope at all times, because if I was going to be meaningful, I'd have to walk a tightrope. And I'd have to see the abyss, but I had to know how I could control things so I wouldn't go into it. You know what I'm saying? And then it was easier than it would be now. I don't know what I would do with a morning show with comedians coming in, and how I would keep from getting into trouble every other day because this group or that group didn't feel they had their needs met.
It's satire. It's satire. We're not talking about the news. The news isn't doing that. It's satire. It's entertainment. It's comedy.
Yeah. Yes.
The rules have to be a little bit different.
Tom?
Yeah, but once again, you did one of the assets that I think that you brought to show. You did hold comedians accountable, and if they went off the line and did something really offensive, and I'm thinking right now there was a comedian, Billy J, and you were doing he was getting into some rant, and it ended up being racist. He wasn't intending it to be racist, but he started making saying things about Chinese people. And you had to stop the whole bit right there. It says, Billy, you realize what you're saying is racist? And you go, oh, wow, that's right. So sometimes, yeah, in the heat of these things, people can, without intending to do that. But still, you still have to hold people accountable.
Yeah, but do you hold them? What is that noise?
Somebody keeps hitting
Somebody's
the
microphone is rubbing.
Yeah. I'll know the next time because the thing will light up.
Light up.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, though, do we hold people accountable for something they did, say, 10 years ago when the sensitivity wasn't the same as it is today, and apply today's sensitivities to then? It's just like saying it was okay for the House Un-American Activities Committee to ask people if they were communists back in 1935, and then to ruin their lives if they were. When today they weren't, when they were being asked that question, they were no longer a communist. They hadn't been a communist for years. They were probably booming capitalists, and yet they were being held accountable for something they did in their youth. Okay, so I mean, a lot of people are being held to account for stuff they said 10 years ago, and when the sensitivities were there, but not to the extent that they are today. And for instance, tonight I came on and I said, with the Oscars, I mean, I don't know why they hired Kevin Hart. I don't find him funny, and so I guess I could get
Works cheap.
Yeah. No, I guess I could get a lot of calls or letters from black people if I had enough viewers of them to say, oh, well, you just don't like Kevin Hart because you're racist. You don't like him because his humor is really black. And so no matter what you do, you're going to be called to account for it. Yes, Brian.
Yeah. By the way, you can see me now, can't you?
Yeah.
All right, and not blocking your vaginal box or anything.
Well, no, it's just in the lower part of the screen, I put my little box with my face, and it was covering your face, and I didn't want to look like I was going down on you. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we wouldn't get the audience that impression. Yeah. Anyhow, or the opposite. But anyway, I sent you all a picture, a meme that I use on Facebook when I'm in discussions with overly sensitive liberals because something Rob said triggered it. People on the left who can't understand that sometimes they're going to see shit they don't like, and sometimes they're going to hear shit they don't like, and that it's costing us dearly, or it has in the past, in terms of Republican politicians and the right, winning shit, not the least of which includes Trump. So there's this meme I have of the Archer character. If any of you are familiar with that show, Archer on FX, where he goes, do you want 4 more years of Trump? Because this is how you get 4 more years of Trump. Buck the fuck up.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that people love about him. He speaks his mind. He's not afraid to say it.
Focus on the real issues. Economic inequality. Basically all the shit that Bernie Sanders talks about. That should be the focus. Yeah. As for getting offended by little shit, that's all it is little shit. Grow a spine. Yeah. Turn the TV off.
Sorry. I can't disagree more. You're talking about beating people up. I mean, that's not being overly sensitive.
Well, that's like yelling fire in a crowded theater, though, Tom. There are limits to speech, and that would be one of them. If you're inciting a terrorist act, or if you're trying to, if you're threatening someone's life, or if you're threatening danger or announcing danger that isn't there, like said fire in said crowded theater, that would be the limit. But in terms of making a gay joke, a trans joke, a fat joke, an age joke, buck the fuck up.
Well, no, I mean,
let
me put it this way: the true arbiter of good taste or bad taste is going to be the self-censorship that somebody's going to take because they don't want to alienate that particular group of people. And
right,
and I see people on television making jokes about old people, and it turns me off to them.
You just watch something else.
I'll tell you.
How about Georgie
How about the real lefty guy, Bill Maher? He makes age jokes all the time.
Yeah.
And I hear him every time he makes them.
Yeah, he does. Meanwhile, he's no spring chicken either.
No. But
the older I get, the more I hear is age jokes.
But
I see people.
Well, then you see it too, right, Ray?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know.
Hey, how's it going?
Gay guys advertising themselves who are 18. I realize I'm twice their age, so I'm not a spring chicken either.
We've been joined by Jack Bishop. Jack, obviously something tickled your fancy.
Well, yeah,
Was it the fact that I don't like black people? Did that bother you?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't like us either, but that's another story. But
Jack is Scottish.
Well, I know you. You always hated Jews, so what the hell,
Well, yeah, hey, it balances out that way.
But you're a quarter Scottish, Jack, so.
No, I'm a quarter Irish.
Oh, Irish, okay.
And you know what the British said about the Irish. But in listening to this conversation, what struck me, one, what a great thing you're doing, but humor, as far as how it affects people, is always how the people that are the butt of the joke see it. It's like nobody in our lifetime ever milked more sacred cows than Richard Pryor. Now, conversely, the guy that came the closest was Dave Chappelle. Another black guy, another black comic, milked as many sacred cows. But Chappelle, at some point, said, I'm not going to say nigger because it bothers me, and I know it bothers other black people. When you were talking about the question of a gay lifestyle, I had something happen here a few months ago with somebody that I have known since 1972, who said to me, Jack, I've never seen you do anything black. And I said, if I walk into the room,
what the hell does that mean?
That's what she said.
The black lifestyle.
If I walk into a room, it's black. If I decided that I would take golf up again, it would be black. And the funny thing about this is the person who introduced me to my first wife. And I'm going, how long have you known me? And it's kind of, I can really appreciate where Tom Yamaguchi was coming from. I worked with the guy at a radio station here for 5 years. I was the only person on the staff who knew that he was gay. And we had all of these girls, and some of them were hot young things, drooling after this guy.
Well, now you know. Yeah, now you know why we straight guys hate gay guys.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they were drooling after this guy.
Yeah.
And I was reminded of what another woman said. Why is it that every man that I meet that has nice clothes, a clean apartment, and a good car is gay? And that was her take.
He was married.
Well, I make my case for the gay lifestyle, okay?
But then there are positive stereotypes too, overly positive stereotypes. Quite a few gay guys I've encountered who aren't neat and tidy.
I don't think that saying somebody's neat and tidy is a negative.
I said positive stereotypes can be just as
well. I used to say
disingenuous.
I used to say. I get to you in a second, Ray. I see your hand up. I used to say that if I say to a black person, is it true that you all have large penises?
Well, I wish that were true.
Well, wait a minute.
I bet you do.
That's not the answer I would usually get. The answer would be, of course, right? No denial whatsoever. I say, then if I say, is it true you all like watermelon? What kind of fucking racist are you? I said, it's just a matter of the stereotype you want to throw out there. There are positive stereotypes and there are negative stereotypes.
As a matter of fact, I once.
Wait a minute. I said Ray could talk.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry. Okay. I just, as far as that, no, I don't want to get into that. I was telling my wife this morning, swear to God, I said, I wish I was a gay black man. I told her that. Because whenever I'm in a show or anything, like I just did a show at Lorraine Hansberry Theater 2 weeks ago. And when I'm working with African American people, I have more fun than I ever do with white people. It's so much fun backstage. It's just more fun.
That's a positive stereotype.
That's a stereotype. It's a stereotype.
It's a stereotype. No. It's my experience. It's my experience.
There's enough bigotry. There's enough bigotry against blacks and gays that even though, yes, right now Hollywood is it seems to be a very gay area, but there is a lot of bigotry, and you wouldn't get a lot of parts as a black person that you might get as a white person.
What I was trying to say was no. That's not what I meant.
By the way, Phil, Hollywood has always been quite gay, even back to the silent era.
It's more fun to be around. I have more fun doing a project with people of color and gay people. I just do.
We have an attack.
It's more fun.
We have an attack of the hands here. Let's go to Rob, and then we'll go to Jack.
So with all this talk, I'm harking back to watching The Little Rascals, where when they all got the measles, the little black child got them in white. Is that not funny?
That's funny.
It's funny.
It's a black and white show.
Well, that is kind of funny. Yeah,
it's funny. Everybody was they were going to school and they wanted to say they were going to play hooky, so all the kids painted black, dots on their face. And the little black kid had little white dots on his face. Well, this is classic.
Let's go to Jack, but then I want to come back and attend to that particular notion. Yes, Jack.
Lenny Bruce summed it up best when he said, usually the people who have the least amount of freedom in society are the most free.
I agree.
Now, I'm still pondering that.
In some ways, it's true. In some ways, it's true. Because they have fewer choices. And when you have fewer choices, you actually have a little bit more freedom because you're not always...
Can I be Chris Christopher-esque on you? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Nothing ain't worth nothing till it's free.
Yeah, so. No, what I was going to say, I think that one of the greatest comedians of all time is one of the most vilified comedians of all time. Mm-hmm. He was a black actor, came up with a wonderful character. His name was Stepin Fetchit.
Yeah.
And he came up with this wonderful character about the guy being lazy and, I'm moving as fast as I can. Now, he was not doing a stereotype. He created... No,
he was pretending to be one of my employees.
Wait a minute. He created the character. The stereotype was created by all the people trying to capitalize on Stepin Fetchit's success. The Mantan Morelands of the world, the Willie Bests, and so on, who imitated him. And so to this day, if you try to say, hey, let's erect a statue to Stepin Fetchit here in Harlem, I would be lynched, by black people for doing that. But yet he was a great comedian and deserved his due. And he never got it because as years went on, his character was considered so vile to the black race because of all these other people that reinforced the stereotype. You get what I'm saying? Am I right?
I do get what you're saying.
That's how stereotypes get made.
Jack, am I right or wrong about that?
Yeah, well, you're right. It's like when I was a kid, and I may have told this story before, when I was a kid, when black performers were on television, even in Bernal Heights in San Francisco, the black mothers would try to get their kids indoors to see Sammy Davis Jr. or Nat Cole or whoever, because we weren't portrayed in mass media.
Right. Well, black people were famous as saying, hey, come quick, there's one of us on TV.
That's my mother used to hang her head out the window and yell, come home, we're on TV. And to talk about Hollywood, one of my favorite people, and I had the pleasure of meeting this man just before he died, a few years short of his 100th birthday, and that was Herb Jeffries, who was a big band singer.
He was also a cowboy star in the movies.
He did westerns, and he was in Texas to be inducted.
And was married to...
some stripper, Blaze Star.
Tempest Storm.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I meet Herb Jeffries because at the radio station I was working at, we were playing that big band music, and they said Bishop does the afternoon show, so he's black, so we'll have him interview Herb Jeffries. Now, what most people did not know about Herb Jeffries,
what was it? The Bronze Buckaroo. That's what they called
Bronze
him.
Buckaroo did three all-black westerns. Harlem Rides the Range.
I have that one here.
Two-Gun Man from Harlem, and the third one I don't remember. But he was surprised that I knew about his movies, and I told him when they were on the Late Show on KRON, my mother would let me stay up to see those movies. Now, what most people did not know, Herb Jeffries, if you see the movies, you can tell that he is a very fair-complected man.
Oh, yeah, well, one of the reasons he became so popular as a singer is because he sounded kind of white. You couldn't put a race to him.
And Hollywood, one of the big studios, offered him a deal. And the deal was, Herb, if you will disappear for 3 or 4 years, change your name, we will bring you back as the new Latin lover.
Okay. Yeah, he could have passed for Latin, yeah.
And Jeffries said, no, I can't do it. I'm comfortable being Herb Jeffries.
Very
I'm
good.
just looking at him. I remember he's very Caucasian looking.
Very Caucasian looking. Yes, Tom had his hand up there. I want to...
Yeah, before we get away this, I know every time we come to these discussions, Alex always invokes Stephen Fetchit. So Jack, as the black person on the panel, do you agree with Alex about Stephen Fetchit?
I really have to. When I was much younger, and I just gotten through reading Soul on Ice.
Yeah.
And I was in my serious militant phase, I would have said no. But looking back from a historical standpoint, not Herb Jeffries, but Stephen Fetchit created a character. And he was not vilified by the black community. We knew at that time it was a character, but the guys that really screwed things up were the Willie Best, the Mantan Morelands. There was a guy named Sleep and Eat. There was another character named Snowflake. These guys carved out that space as the black space. There's a great book about this called Mammies, Coons, and something else that talks about black Hollywood during the age of the studio system. And if you ever watch any of those movies...
By the way, it may surprise you to know that I have watched a lot of black, or what they called race films back in the day. Oscar Micheaux, one of the greatest directors ever in American film, never really got his films shown. And they were brilliant films.
Another example of a black...
Oh, and by the way, the guy who played Andy Brown on Amos and Andy was a very famous director in black films.
Yeah. These people worked in such a system. If you look at any of those movies out of the 30s that are not black films, and the black characters are not doing blackface, you will notice a very interesting thing. They are specialty acts. So when those films were shown in the South, they could be edited out easily. Lena Horne had as her contract that she would never play a servant. So all of the film appearances she made up until probably the 60s, she was singing a song, so it could be edited out. There's in one of the Thin Man movies, and I'm a big fan of William Powell and the Thin Man, there's this dance routine that's done at a nightclub. And if you look at it in its entirety, you say, what a great dance routine. I saw a edited version for a Southern play, and that whole dance scene was cut out. This was the kind of Hollywood these people worked in.
Anybody else have a comment here about this? Yes, Ray.
Well, I just want to agree that I think Stepin Fetchit was an amazing talent, whatever his real name was. And my grandfather, who was a very, lived through that whole thing, his two favorite actors were Buster Keaton and Stepin Fetchit. And he said they were the best. And I have to agree with him.
And Stepin Fetchit was brilliant. He was just absolutely brilliant.
And Buster Keaton, too. I mean, he's a white guy. But, I mean, my grandfather didn't look at Stepin Fetchit as like a black man do it. I mean, he just thought he was a great actor.
Wouldn't you say...
And he was, and I went back and watched some of it. I think it's hilarious. It's absolutely
Jack,
hilarious.
wouldn't you say...
And moving.
Wouldn't you say that this day, though, Jack, Stepin Fetchit is vilified?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, probably.
Well, that's sad, because the talent is amazing. He's incredible.
Yeah,
he really is.
Someone found over in Tyler, Texas, which is about 120 miles, 150 miles east of Dallas, reels and reels of race movies, and the SMU, Southern Methodist University Film Department, did a month-long festival of all of these films, many of which had not been seen since the early 30s.
Right.
And it was glorious. My wife didn't see me for almost a week.
We talk about racism. What you had back then was you had race films. They called them race films.
Right.
And they played in places like Harlem, where there were predominantly black people living. And there were race records.
Yes.
There was like the OK label, which was a offshoot of Columbia that did nothing but race records. Brunswick, which did nothing but race records in those days. And then you also had, and you remember this fondly, or we had white radio stations and we had black radio stations. And if I, as a white guy, went over to the black radio station and said, I love rhythm and blues, I'd love to work here, forget it. No.
Well, it wasn't forget it. You may not remember this, but the big...
I see you, Phil. Yeah.
The black jock in San Francisco when you and I were kids.
Yes, was Jumpin' George Oxford.
Who was white.
Yeah. But with a name like Jumpin' George Oxford, you didn't know on radio whether he's black or white.
Now, when I went
How did I remember that name? God, it just came out of me like and I can't remember my wife's name.
One of the big guys in the South, John R. on WLAC, Nashville, Tennessee.
But you know what I'm saying. When you want to talk about where there was segregation in our business,
it was we always had it.
And actually, it still exists to this day.
Yes, yeah. I worked at one station for 10 years doing evenings, and they put people in midday and afternoon all around me, and they never moved me.
Right.
They paid me good money. They probably paid me afternoon drive money because I stayed there so long. And we got a new program director who was kind of uneasy about this black guy on a country station, and I told him, Danny, the audience already knows.
Yeah. Phil, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Jack, you remember the play Hair.
Sure.
There was a song in there called Colored Spade. How did that affect the black community? Did they look at it as racism, or did they look?
I don't remember that song.
I don't either.
But I'm a colored spaded nigger, a black nigger, a jungle bunny, jigger, boom, coon, Uncle Tom, and
Minnie Mau Mau.
Well, look, you gotta remember that by then, black folks had gotten pretty damn secure. When I was a kid growing up, the epitome of black beauty was light skin and, as we called it, good hair. And I was dating this girl who had a PhD in biochemistry, and my grandmother was upset because, one, she was darker complected than me, and she had an afro. And my grandmother, you got to quit going out with her. I don't want you marrying somebody like that.
Well, Jack,
she's got a better education than I have, and she's got a real job.
As you come off here on Skype, you would be what would be called high yellow.
Not first of all, one, black people never use that term.
I know.
Number two, no, I may be perceived as high yellow to you, but high yellow to black folk would be somebody like Herb Jeffries or my mother.
Oh, really?
When my mother married my dad.
Or a guy with an uncalibrated monitor.
Maybe that's my problem. Because you look purple.
Jack's all yellow on Alex's monitor.
When my mother married my dad, who was Nat King Cole black, the family had a fit. I did not know about that until I was 40 years old.
Was this not a racism that went on within the black communities, that the darker blacks were not as preferable as lighter blacks?
This is a direct result of the slave master culture.
Yeah.
You know, I always point out that the reason that my mom's family had some money was because of that illegitimate son who owned my great-great-great-grandmother.
By the way, Tom has his hand up. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, was that known as the paper bag test?
The paper bag test. Have you guys heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
There was a
No, I haven't.
TV comedy a number of years ago about a restaurant in New Orleans. And I'm trying to remember the comedian who did that. He's dead now. But they actually did a whole episode on that where people were allowed in a club, a private club, based on if their skin tone was light enough to pass. And that's what I heard about
There were all sorts of social clubs. My mother belonged to a sorority at the college that she went to, and that was
Tim Reed.
Tim Reed, yeah. Another good actor who did a lot as far as breaking down some barriers. But she belonged to this sorority, and the test was a woman would turn her hand over and show her wrist. If the skin on her wrist, on the under, was as light or lighter than a paper bag, they'd let her in the sorority.
Wow. Yes, Ray.
Yeah, two things. Jack, I read a book once that said, ironically, the whole premise of the book was that before the Civil Rights Amendment, in some ways the black culture did a lot better than they do now because of like what you were saying about radio and some of the movie industry. Also, Las Vegas had its own strip that was just for black people.
Do you think that the segregation was positive?
Well, that was the premise of the book. Now, it didn't say it was all positive. It just said that kind of disappeared after the Civil Rights Amendment, unfortunately. And there was a lot of loss of that sort of
like a whole economy.
A whole economy that was just for black people.
It was more competition, I guess.
I mean, is that accurate?
Is it accurate? To some degree, yeah. Because as Phil said, you got more competition. When you can't go into the man's coffee shop, that creates a business opportunity for the people that have a coffee shop you can go into.
I see. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question.
Thing,
I was going to bring up two things culturally and see what people think about them, and especially you too, Jack. One, Amos and Andy, and two, Song of the South.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wrote an article for Hustler. One of my columns that I had when I was doing a column every month for Hustler was titled, Who Killed Uncle Remus?
Mm-hmm.
And what it was about was how this picture had been completely eliminated from the Disney catalog. The only place you could buy a copy of Song of the South was in Asia. And there it was on Laserdisc, DVD, whatever. The only way you could see any part of it here was perhaps when you saw Uncle Remus singing Zippity Doo-Dah. And that was it. I have that whole film. I have watched that whole film. It was, to begin with, Disney went and hired a Jew who he didn't like Jews that much, but he hired a Jew to write the screenplay because he felt he would write it in a way that wasn't racist. And I watched that film and I go, this is a film about people, a young boy befriends an old black man who tells him these wonderful stories because the kid's family doesn't love him and doesn't treat him right. And it shows on how blacks and whites get along together and how they can have a bonding together. It's a beautiful film. And it's complete. You can't find it anywhere because Disney's afraid people will perceive of it as racist. And the other thing, of course, is Amos and Andy, in which I've often said, where else on television could you find an all-black program in which blacks were not only portrayed in the normal sitcom stereotypes of being buffoons and silly, but also as lawyers, doctors, professionals? Those people were all portrayed on Amos and Andy. And it was, by the way, an all-black cast that gave a lot of black people work. And what happened to it? You know? We became politically correct. And somehow...
The pendulum swung too far.
Well, the NAACP worked to get it removed from syndication.
Well, the thing is, you got to remember, a lot of that had to do with how many portrayals of black life did you see at that time other than Amos and Andy, other than Beulah, other than the Stu Irwin show with Willie Best?
When I see in those cases of Willie Best and Beulah and so on, I do consider those stereotypes. Yeah, I did not consider what was going on Amos and Andy a stereotype. They were cartoon characters because it was a sitcom, but it was balanced off by the fact that you had professionals, you had the doctors, you had lawyers, you had the long-suffering wife of Kingfish, who was always portrayed with a great deal of dignity. You know, Amanda Randolph was her name, I think.
Amanda Randolph played Sapphire's mother.
Oh, okay.
But you're right in that you had black lawyers, black doctors. Amos was a businessman who had his own cab.
He was a very good businessman and a very hardworking businessman.
You know, but the problem was, it wasn't until, to show you the impact, that did not begin the role of black people portrayed on American television.
Yeah.
Just television now. Really did not begin to change until 65 with I Spy.
With Cosby, yeah.
Yeah. And even there, Cosby, for the first couple of years, could have no romantic interest.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe that's what set him off.
Mr. Bennett, excuse me. I know it's your show, but got to give him the bell for that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was interesting was when he did get a romantic interest, it was Nancy Wilson, who 20 years later would play his mother.
Really?
Yeah.
On the Cosby
Show.
Yes,
Ray has his hand up.
I took a year of African American studies when I went to Cal, and it was all about people of color in film. Mm-hmm. And always the rule was, if it was a regular Hollywood film, that if there was a romantic interest with anybody with a person of color, they had to have a dire ending. They had to be killed or maimed or destroyed in some way. Every single movie. I mean, it was like a punishment for...
Not Sidney Poitier starting to turn things around?
Well, that was later.
That was the 60s.
That was later. I'm talking about like between the 30s and the 50s, mostly. Or earlier even.
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner didn't happen until 67.
Yeah.
And even in that one, they were worried about showing the kiss between the couple.
Yep.
Yeah.
My God, Maybelle, get out the gun and shoot the screen.
Jack, I saw a play at Berkeley Rep about 10 years ago called Yellow Man, and it dealt with prejudice in the South between members of the African American community against people who were light-skinned. It was really interesting. Yeah. I didn't know this was something that went on.
It's interesting in my mother's family. Yeah. Mainly people who are lighter complected than I am. Her siblings, except for one, all married people darker. And I asked my favorite uncle, who I told his son his dad had my back from the day I was born till the day he died. And I asked my uncle about that. And he said, we got so tired of being put down as half white, yellow, whatever, that we sort of, without even discussing it, decided we didn't want that burden for our kids.
Yep, that's what this play was about. It was really good. Yeah. I had no idea that was something that even went on. I was blown away.
Well, Ray, it's like Northern Italians and Sicilians.
It's the same thing.
That's right.
Tom.
Right.
My grandmother hated it.
It goes on in every culture.
Tom's got his hand up.
It goes on in every culture. Darker the skin, the more they're discriminated against.
No, this was the other way around, but that's just because it was in the South in a specific area. The lighter skinned people were discriminated. Yeah. Sorry.
I just felt inspired to share a story. I found out about Petulia Clark a few years ago. Jack, maybe you would know the story.
Petula, actually. It's not
Petulia.
Petula.
Whatever. But anyway, she was doing a special for NBC and TV. And she decided to have Harry Belafonte on.
Yes.
You heard the story?
Well, no, I heard. Of course, tell them the story.
Okay,
but let's mention mention before you tell the story. She was British. Okay, British have an entirely different sensibility. Go ahead.
Well, anyway, so the way I read the story was she had Harry Belafonte. They did a duet together, and at the end of the duet, they just reached out and held each other's hands. And the I guess it was her husband was a producer. Clark's husband was a producer on this special, and NBC says, "You have to redo it."
It was worse than that. It was worse than that. It was worse than that, Tom. It was the sponsor who complained.
Well, yeah,
and said no, and the sponsor, the head of the company that was sponsoring it, said. No white woman will clasp hands or something or embrace a black person on any TV show I'm sponsoring. Yeah,
and what I liked about the story was her husband came back and says, "No, the scene's been shot. We're not redoing it. Take it or leave it."
No, I even heard something to the extent that maybe it was cut. They said, cut it, and they said, okay, it's been cut, and then they ran the print, and of course it was still in there.
Well, the version of the story I read was that he refused to cut it, and the network and the sponsor backed down and let it show. But it was even up into the 60s. The reason I mentioned this story is even up in the 60s, it was really difficult to get Southern TV affiliates, like to shows like Sesame Street.
Yeah,
they wouldn't show Sesame Street for years. They wouldn't show, Mr. Rogers with the black police.
Nat Cole had a TV show, a 15-minute TV show every day on NBC that got canceled after like 13 weeks because...
No, they kept it for a year.
For how long?
Kept the Nat Cole show for a whole year, but they could never find a sponsor.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen those shows on here on Channel 9. And they were fantastic shows that Kit Cole was doing.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's really sad.
Well, everybody that knew Nat wanted to work with him and wanted to help him out. We talked about Vegas a little while ago. The most important thing that Sammy Davis ever did in Vegas?
What?
And he was the first black performer to do that.
To stay in a hotel, a white hotel.
No, that wasn't it. That was Sinatra.
Well, no,
Sinatra went to the buffet at the Sands.
No. He was the first black performer ever to walk to the edge of the stage and talk to the audience. Before Sammy did that, the black acts came out, they did their number, and they left by the back door because they couldn't stay in the hotel.
Well, of course, the other story was that Frank Sinatra found out that they said, no, he's got to stay at the Tropicana, I think is where Black Act stayed.
That's right.
And Sinatra said to the head of the, I think it was the Sands Hotel where he was performing, Sammy Davis Jr., find him a room here. And they said, well, I'm sorry, he can stay at the Tropicana. I said, no, you don't want to have Sammy Davis Jr. stay here, then you don't want me to perform here either. And I won't perform unless you let him stay here. And Sinatra was very much into that sort of thing. He was very much for equal rights for everybody.
And Sinatra was quietly behind much of the civil rights movement out the 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Hello to Bree, by the way, out there in Dubai. All we see is a picture on him, but we know he's there.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Yes, Ray.
I've always felt that Sammy Davis Jr. had two things going for him. One, he was very good friends with Frank Sinatra. And two, his talent was so immense that he could do anything he wanted. Because
I mean that, man.
He was incredible. I mean, he truly was. But, I mean, that's how good a black person had to be to get respect. It was ridiculous. I mean, he was that good, I think.
He had to become a Jew.
Yeah. you know what's funny though? I always found funny is him and Sinatra were such good friends, but they would make racist jokes back and forth all the time together, and it was in good fun. There didn't seem to be any.
Some of the stuff that Sinatra did with Sammy Davis Jr. on stage was absolutely racist.
Yeah.
But yet Frank was one of the major. I mean, his mother was a left winger, real heavy left winger, and he grew up in that. And to him, you know, it was a black person had the same rights he did. But on stage, you could make a joke about him being black. You know,
right? You would make
jokes. They would come out and they would be holding him in their arms and say, "I want to present this award to you from the NAACP." That was one of the things.
That's one of my favorite routines they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it was in really good humor, and I thought
couldn't do it today.
We can't do that anymore.
Yes, Tom.
Well, it gets back to what we were saying earlier. Was it racist or just racial? I mean, you can make jokes about race as long as the jokes aren't putting black people down, right? I mean, in a way, since Sammy Davis Jr. could joke about himself, it's just like Ray Charles could joke about his blindness, right?
Right. But Jews could joke about Jews, you know, the Borscht Belt or any of those types of things.
Hell, Stevie Wonder used to joke to me about his blindness. He would call me up at 3 o'clock in the morning on my show and saying, "I'm taking the car out for a drive. You want to come with me?" You know, and I was at a party once with him, and he comes in. And after a while, I decided I'll sidle up to him and say hi. And I sidle up to him. I said, Stevie? And he says, yeah. I said, it's Alex. He says, oh, Alex, hi. I said, you know, you've really become too big a star. He said, why? I said, you walked in the room. He didn't even notice me. Yeah.
Do you remember the Saturday Night Live routine that they did? I think Eddie Murphy played Stevie Wonder. And it was Stevie Wonder for Canon Canon EOS cameras, and he was shooting guys playing tennis, and he missed all the shots he was snapping away. And then they had him on the tennis court, and he was missing all the balls. He was just that was hysterical. Now, would that be considered something you couldn't do today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sinatra couldn't do most of his act today.
No,
between the sexist jokes and the race stuff and the this and the that. No, you know.
Yeah, you can't judge people by 30-year-old or 40-year-old standards and then judge them.
Let me bring
today.
something up here. Let's go really back, okay? Let's go back to minstrel shows, okay? Now, we all look at them and go, how racist is that? A bunch of white guys dressed up as black people, and the black guys that may have been working the show had to have white lips, right? Anyway, or going to heaven on a mule with Al Jolson in, I'm trying to remember which picture it is now, which it's like nothing but black people around this guy wearing blackface kind of looking daggers at him like they want to kill him. But anyway, the point I'm making is that minstrel shows, really nobody thought of those people on the stage as imitating black people. It was a stylization. Everything in theater in those days, you go back to French theater, and there was a stylization and so on. This was a kind of style of entertainment that didn't have anything to do with racism. As a matter of fact, it almost seemed like they appreciated the music of blacks and the talent of blacks. Would you disagree with that, Jack, with that assessment?
I wouldn't disagree with the question of talent and music. I mean, American music has always been vanilla fudge ripple. Yeah. But there were black minstrel troops that performed in blackface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did the white lips,
do you
right?
think that if they were black minstrels, that the white audience would embrace them at that time because of prejudice?
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the guy, but one of the biggest acts in the minstrel business for years.
We said minstrel, folks, not minstrel. Go ahead.
The minstrel.
You got your minstrel right here. Take a look at this. Yeah. But his name was Ben something, and I can't remember what his name was.
Ben Hur?
No, Ben Carter.
Ben Dover.
Stop it. But he was a black performer.
Mm-hmm.
He made top dollar and was embraced by the audience. Another good example. You don't have to go back that far. One of the biggest country singers in the business in the 60s and 70s.
Charlie Pride.
Charlie Pride.
Yep.
I love Charlie Pride.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and when I met Charlie Pride, he said to me, Jack, I didn't know.
Oh, by the way, you while you just ticked something off of me, because the other night you mentioned something, you couldn't come up with the name, about a guy in France who his entire act was coming out and farting to music.
Oh,
okay. His name was Lepetamain. And he would come.
Where Mel Brooks got the name.
That's where he got the name. Yeah.
Ah.
And Lepetamain was famous for having. He had tails, tucks and tails, and then he would pull up the tails, and there was a big hole in his pants, and then he would start farting to music. And he was literally the biggest act in show business in France for many years running. So.
Hey, they like Jerry Lewis. You know, I don't think the French have that much.
And they always made a point of the fact that he did his act and it was odorless. Okay.
Yeah, he thought so.
Because otherwise, nobody would have wanted to buy a seat in the front row. You know.
That has to be a fake name because in French, "pet" means fart.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the name he used was Lepetamain. Yeah.
I will go to my grave remembering this now.
Yeah, well, now you see, I was going to call you up and tell you it was Lepetamain. I've always known that for some strange reason. There's a great book, I think it was actually written by Ricky Jay, the late Ricky Jay, called Fireproof Fireproof Women and Something Else. And it's a history of all the kind of freak acts that used to appear in show business. And Lepetamain has a whole chapter on that. Yeah. So
I'd be curious to see what people think. Has everybody here seen the movie Blazing Saddles?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that movie couldn't be made today. Isn't that like a shame?
Yes.
And yet, well, it was the least racist movie I've ever seen dealing with race that way. Yes, Tom.
You could say it was poking fun at race. I mean, that was the whole point of the movie. It was about poking fun at race. So yeah, you could make it as much today as you could then.
You think you could?
Oh yeah,
I think so.
I mean, because it's
Well, I love the part where they go.
It's poking fun at race.
Excuse me for using the language, but this was in the movie of Slim Pickens saying to the black people, why don't you guys sing us one of those nigger spirituals that you sing so well? And they go, okay, and they start singing, I get no kick from champagne, mere alcohol does.
And Cleavon Little with the where the white women at?
And by the way, one of the writers on that film, one of the writers on that film, Richard Pryor, So
Brilliant.
Yes.
I don't know if you talked about this earlier, but it seems like some comedians still get a pass, like the late Don Rickles, Lisa Lampanelli, and others, I'm sure, on the racist stuff. And like, what is that? What is that? I mean, what they get a pass and other comedians don't.
It's the venues, maybe that they.
But you don't hear about but Roseanne Barr loses her career. I mean,
because Roseanne Barr's a Republican or conservative.
Roseanne Barr made her comments on Twitter not during an act.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm just trying to see.
Roseanne Barr made a political comment on Twitter that wasn't on stage as part of a routine.
By the way, there is no way in a Twitter. Okay,
I get it.
You can be sarcastic.
No,
because you can't write sarcastically. It's impossible.
No, it is impossible.
So what would Roseanne Barr's inflection have been in that? We don't know. Because
exactly.
So you assume the worst.
So you don't write tweets.
You don't.
If you consider sarcasm important.
And if you're Kathy Griffin, you don't take pictures with Donald Trump's head in your hand.
That was stupid too.
Yeah, it was.
As I hate Donald Trump, that was
as
terrible.
much as I hate Kathy Griffin. Yeah,
I mean, it was stupid. Yeah.
It reminds me of what they said about Abraham Lincoln, that he wrote a lot of letters, but he didn't send them. So, he had written letters to Grant and so forth. And I don't know if they surfaced years after his death and Grant's death, but, he wasn't happy with them. And he wrote these letters, but it's like doing Twitter and not pressing send. And, you can express yourself, but you don't have to send the message. It just
but
necessary.
You know something? The problem today is that message is sent with one click of a button. It's this thing, one click, and
it's kind of like the buy it now.
And there's no, and you you can take it back, but once you've sent it, some people are going to get it, and it's going to show up on some people's queue, and you can prevent it from maybe being retweeted. But not the original tweet is not going to be erased. If somebody's got it on their screen, it doesn't suddenly disappear.
I felt bad for Roseanne Barr. If I remember correctly, she realized she fucked up and went back pretty quickly and deleted it.
Here's what I don't understand. We live in an age where there are two things that are wrong. Whatever is not considered currently right to say or do, and the other is apologizing. People are not allowed to apologize. She apologized profusely for that. So they say, okay, you apologized. You know you did wrong. Good for apologizing. We've renewed your show. You're on for next year. No.
Louis C.K. apologized right away, too. And he didn't get any credit for it.
Yeah.
People don't want the apology. They would rather go and continue to attack than be big enough to take the apology.
Let me tell you something I love about political correctness, is that because there are so many stories about it out there, the New York Times, for instance, now feels compelled that they have to tell you why something somebody did wasn't politically correct. And so the other day, to read the New York Times and saying, he told me to put his penis in my mouth in the New York Times was wonderful to see in print. When did you ever think you would see those words together in the New York Times? He told me to put to put my mouth around his penis or whatever.
It's all the news that's fit to print.
It was describing the Les Moonves situation and the woman describing what went on, and they printed it. In the old days, they wouldn't even print the word penis, for crying out loud. So thank you.
Did you hear about the two Marine pilots that got into trouble using their contrails to draw a penis in the sky?
That's talent.
I heard about this.
Yeah, and these guys are they're not facing court-martial, but they're facing disciplinary action.
Now we'll get a feminist to call our show and say, "Well, why didn't they make a vagina?" Because it's harder to draw a vagina. Okay, just a couple of curvy lines, you got a penis.
If they put weed in the incense burner, a lot of folks would suddenly say, "Hey, man,
This stuff doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so we got about 3 minutes left here. I want to know, what do we do about this? Is all this political correctness just getting out of hand?
Yes, it is completely.
How about you, Tom?
One thing, I'm really getting sick of the term political correctness.
Okay.
It is just bandaged about, and everybody has their own definition. I mean, the original term actually came from Marxists. And everybody's just throwing it about. I just say, what's the matter of being respectful? Respecting somebody's feelings and recognizing, hey, if I'm hurting you, I need to own up to that.
Also,
and that gets back to the other thing. Just one more thing.
Yeah.
And that is an apology is a question of, is it a heartfelt apology? Is it, gee, I'm sorry I got caught? People can recognize whether an apology is heartfelt, if somebody really means it, and they can say, I know why I did wrong. This is why I did wrong. And
I let a lot of stuff roll off my back, during this show. Not today, but at times. It's like how you take it in. You can choose to be offended.
I don't think I've said some nasty things.
I don't choose to be victimized, and I have been victimized. I was physically assaulted in high school and gay bashed, and I just refuse to accept it.
Well, I always like to say that
people refuse to accept.
Well, then you and I have. You and I. Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Bashing in words is different.
Tom and I have something in common. I was gay bashed in high school as well, and I wasn't even gay.
Right.
Because if your father took you to the symphony instead of taking you out to learn how to play baseball, and what are you, a fag or something? So I
was gay bashed and it made me get into sports.
Yeah.
And then no one gay bashed me anymore.
Oh, because you got into sports?
Yeah, and I lifted weights like crazy because I was sick of it.
No, I was
shit kicked out of me all the time.
Yeah, and the funny part is being gay bashed in high school, many of those kids didn't even know what being gay was.
No, it was just if you weren't one of the
queer something,
well-developed.
That was the term. Well, anyway, it's just that I think that when political correctness, and I know you don't like the term, but it does exist, starts dictating everything we do and starts impinging upon the arts that, that's not in good taste or that isn't politically correct.
I'm politically correct because I like Trump.
Well, one thing I was going to say, Phil, is God knows I've said horrible things about you on this show, and much to your credit, not once have you ever taken it to heart. That's right. Because you understand I'm doing in the nature of high-spirited discussion.
I also know that you're two people.
And
the real Alex is extremely sensitive.
Yeah, and you also understand that I like you a lot, as a friend. So
I like you too, Phil.
Thank you.
Oh, let this be then the first step towards international brotherhood. My God.
Where's the kumbaya?
I'll get your,
hell with this.
Well, I'll get your Republican ballots in the morning.
Yeah. Anyway, I wish I knew how to describe each of you in a racially insensitive way, but I can't really do it. Well,
I'm a Dago.
I think Phil's an au-fait motherfucker. Okay, that we know for sure.
I'm a spudlock cocksucker.
Okay, good, and a damn good one at that. Anyway, hey, listen.
Look at him sucking that pencil.
It's a rim job there.
All right. Now we're getting insensitive.
I read.
Hey, thank you all. First of all, to Rob Alfano, Phil Meyer, Ray Renati, Tom Yamaguchi, Brian Ludwig, and Bree. You didn't say anything.
Well, next time.
And of course, Jack Bishop, who is next with The Intersection. Thanks for being here. All of you, give me a big good wave goodbye so they can see. That Ray, you're really good at it. Anyway, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. That's our citizen panel for tonight. That's our show for this week. And a good one it's been. Really good one. And I just made it to the end before being so tired I almost feel like passing out. Anyway, Jack Bishop's next with The Intersection. On Tuesday, we come on right after Damian Chaplin does The Exchange at 10 o'clock. Same time, same station in life. And in the meantime, as always, if you see her, tell her I love her, okay? Bye-bye, everybody.